now deal with how to treat, how to manage is very important. And we have Dr. Neha Rastogi Panda, who's a new entrant into infectious disease. She's a DM of infectious disease from All India Institute of Medical Sciences. She's working as a senior consultant at Fortis Medical Research Institute in Gurgaon. And now she'll take us through how would be the management of dengue fever.
Thank you, sir.
Neha.
Can I start? Yeah. So we will be talking about in next 15 to 20 minutes about the management of dengue, where we'll be focusing on the existing management, which is actually very supportive in nature. Second, very important and utmost important query is immunomodulation in dengue, especially when Dr. Saurav was talking about the severe and the critical forms of dengue. And third, as Dr. Ashok has also mentioned in the previous context, is old tricks to find the newer tricks to find the old enemy. Can I have the next slide? So just on the lighter note to go ahead with that, after the end of next 15 to 20 minutes, although we have already discussed about making the correct diagnosis is the utmost important in dengue fever. And that is why ordering a right test at the right time is mandatory. When to order NS1, when not to order the NS1, when to order IgM is very important. Defining organ severity, as Dr. Saurav has beautifully highlighted in his talk, is very, very important, and to anticipate and prevent the complications. Next slide. Now I'll just highlight, can you make one? All right. So I just want to highlight before taking into the cascade that these are the three, since we are talking about the management, so the clinical scenario needs to be fit in. So there are three case scenarios where one, a patient is NS1 positive. After 4 to 5 days, fever subsides. He is orally accepting, except weakness, rest is stable. And the peak nadir of the platelet has gone up to 80,000 platelets. The second case says NS1 positive, but after 2 to 3 days, patient got hospitalized due to epistaxis. Platelet count reached at 10K. He was kept under monitoring, hemodynamically stable, and bleeding stopped. And the third scenario is a same patient of NS1 positive, but after 2 to 3 days, hospitalized, epistaxis, platelet reached 8K, kept under monitoring, though bleeding subsided. Eventually, in its critical to the recovery road, he developed a bilateral effusion, ascites, and eventually landed up into the dengue shock syndrome. So now he is in ICU on fluid and inotropes. 3 patients, same case, but with the 3 different scenarios. So as my previous speaker has already highlighted about the dengue fever can be mild in nature in majority of the patients, which requires just a homemade management with a good oral intake of fluids. Dengue fever with the high risk comorbidity and a dengue fever with the grade 1 and warming signs actually comes into a similar category. So for example, a patient who is immunocompromised in nature, say suppose a patient who is on a chemotherapy or a patient of a transplant developing dengue with the rapid fall in the platelet count. These days, we have already started admitting the dengue fever with the ITP and all, because in the anticipation that platelet counts go further low. Severe dengue, as he has already discussed in the previous slide, any organ involvement, severe metabolic acidosis in the form of hypotension. So these last 3 categories, I would say, requires and build up the admission criteria. Next slide. Now, what is the major general principle of dengue management? So there are 3 most important principles of dengue disease management: fluid, fluid, and fluid. Doesn't mean you have to bombard the patient with the fluids. It means 3 important point of view to reach. One, fluid is the utmost limiting factor as well as the successful factor in the clinical outcome. Second, when to stop, when to switch from IV to oral. A patient hospitalized does not mean that he has to be kept on only IV fluids. If they are orally accepting and just for monitoring, you can easily switch to the oral therapy. Third, is that single scenario fits all sizes? No. If the patient is already a hypertensive, congestive heart failure, sort of EF, which is less than 30 or 25%, doesn't mean you have to again bombard it with the fluids. So fluids is most important, but to have a delineation that what patient, what kind of fluid, at what rate, and when to stop is the most important item in the dengue management. Next slide. Now, I'll just quickly go through the next 1 or 2 slides that this is the fluid management which we are talking about. So it's just a table that if your patient have an adequate oral intake, yes, you can go on, continue the vital checking. Patient is stable, do the IV fluids at the lower rate and then switch to the oral fluids. If the patient is not stable, then you check the hematocrit. So one important aspect is whenever we start seeing the CBC, it is not only about that you see a platelet count in the dengue. Apart from that, there are 2 more important things which you should see in a CBC. One is the hematocrit, which is a very important marker to reach and to understand the rate of the fluid administration. Second is the neutrophil to the lymphocyte ratio, the NL ratio, which actually says about the prognosis in the dengue. So a CBC, a simple CBC can help you in tackling the fluid management very delicately and very reliably in the dengue patient. Next slide. Now, as Dr. Saurabh has highlighted about the compensated shock and a decompensated shock, it all depends upon the hemodynamic stability, also depends upon the clinical status of the patient, and of course the hematocrit. And then you have, if the clinical status is improved, you can taper down the crystalloid, which is the most common acceptable fluid in the dengue, at a lower rate and eventually leads to the oral. And if it is not improved, then you even have to take a help from the colloid partners, that is albumin or PRBC in terms of the hemoglobin drop, so as to replete the intravascular status, so as to avoid any decompensation in the hemodynamic parameters. Next slide. So this is what I was mentioning about the hypotensive shock, as Dr. Saurabh has also highlighted, that if you reassess the hemodynamic status and patient is going into the shock, that means this total circulatory failure. Apart from the crystalloid, just to have an intravascular repletion, you have to add a colloid alongside. And then based on the hematocrit improvement, you can actually switch to only crystalloid or take out the colloid in a very slower rate. Or if the adequate fluid intake is there, urine output is well preserved, then you can even might discontinue the IV fluid. Next slide. So the last 3 slides have actually told us about how to monitor a dengue chart in a hospital. So this is our hospitals in my area's dengue monitoring chart, that where we write about the vitals, bleeding signs, major bleeding signs, warning signs to be asked every time in the round to the patient, urine output, hematocrit alongside the hemoglobin and the TLCs, and of course the platelet count. Next slide. Can you tap it? Now, what are the causes of thrombocytopenia? We all know that we all fear about the thrombocytopenia, but it's not just that the platelet gets disrupted. There is a bone marrow suppression transient. It is majorly an immunocomplex mediated, macrophage activation induced, anti-NS1 antibody mediated, and of course, sometimes patient lands up in the DIC. Based on that, there is the different guidelines which cohort and consensus around that if the patient is asymptomatic, nothing, no bleeding is there, you can keep up the platelet count up to bare minimum of 10,000. And whereas if you have sometimes there is a heavy bleeding risk, there can be a discretion from 10 to 15 also. But majority times 10,000 is the cutoff which is being defined by the various guidelines. In cases of any emergency surgeries, as he has mentioned in the pregnancy, if you have to undergo a C-section or say an emergency neurosurgery, the platelet count then have to be kept at around 50 to 75,000 based on the surgical perspective. Next slide. Have to talk about definitely this, because this is the most important queries being asked in this season. Can we take a goat milk? Can we take a papaya leaf juice? Caripil, which was sometimes prescribed as a wonder drug in dengue. Can we take more and more kiwi-like fruits and all? So these are all the very adjunct, very off-label, only, as I clearly mentioned, experimental therapy, and the picture in the slide can easily tell us our reaction as a doctors. So there has been no consensus about these things adding on to any benefit. Rather, goat milk, papaya leaf juice causes more and more gastric problems, more and more diarrhea-related complications. Next slide. Next slide. Now, I'll just switch on to the next part of the dengue. So we have talked about the preliminary simplified form of the dengue management in terms of the important fluid management. Now, how the ball game revolves around when the dengue takes turn in a complicated way. One part is uncommon manifestations of the common disease. So this is just a case to highlight that the patient who developed the generalized body movements in the state of shock, developed an altered sensorium, found out to be E2M2, and in the poor sensorium, he was on mechanical ventilation, eventually seen out to be anemia, leukocytosis, thrombocytopenia, and elevated liver enzymes. And in the CT head, there was the white matter edema across the frontal lobe as well as the different other lobes of the brain. And with the provisional working diagnosis of meningoencephalitis with thrombocytopenia, there were different etiologies considered, but dengue IgM antibody, when being done, it came out to be positive. And eventually, when we did CSF, and I'm sure Dr. Ekta will be telling us about the molecular diagnosis, CSF dengue PCR was found to be positive. Next slide. Another similar case, which we go off and on in these type of the season, is a patient with the fever, dengue positive, but things doesn't end here. At day 5, day 8, there has been persistently low platelet count. And you can imagine a patient who is admitted from the day 2 or day 3 with the high grade fever. There is a time when the fever stops, the patient tries to go home. But as Dr. Saurav has beautifully described, that when the day 5 ends and the fever ends, there the actual problems and the stories begin. And that's why it's called as a critical phase. So day 10, day 12, the patient counts were persistently low. AST, ALT were going high. Platelet was still stuck at 9,000. TLC was getting down. Hemoglobin was started getting down. We were keep transfusing the patient with blood products and the platelet. Next slide. And then eventually, when we started looking for the other parameters in dengue, we found out ferritin was 15,000, triglycerides was 500. Then we took the hematology opinion, bone marrow was done, and we found out the hemophagocytosis. Next slide. So this is just to stimulate about the uncommon manifestations, which we in our practice called as expanded dengue syndrome. That is to designate the cases which doesn't fall into either a DSS or a dengue hemorrhagic fever, rather a severe dengue. So it can have a plethora of manifestations right from the eye to the toe. And the major pathogenesis is involving is the cytokine storm, immune-mediated injuries, and the plasma leakage syndrome. And the one of the commonest areas which are getting involved is by the neurotropicity or by the indirect effects in terms of the neuroinflammation is the brain, which causes encephalitis, meningoencephalitis, and even acute disseminated encephalomyelitis. Next slide. So these are the few papers which we have seen as in our own practices. This is one of the paper. Our patient came up with the altered sensorium, got acute disseminated encephalomyelitis, CSF dengue positive as well as dengue IgM positive, well treated with the help of the steroids and the other supportive therapy. On the other side, there is a case on the myocarditis, as we say, that dengue has been one of the causes of the relative bradycardia, but it can eventually lead to even a full-blown myocarditis as well. Next slide. So this is our own data, which we have collected over last 1 year. In the last year of the dengue tropic season, more than 100 plus patients with the different type of expanded dengue syndrome manifestations. So the idea to put this slide is to make you aware that dengue can present in any form, and to catch hold of it, diagnosis is still easy, but the suspicion is the most important key when you come across in any tropics that think about dengue in one of the differentials. Next slide. Now, another important concept is the immunomodulation in dengue. Can we go back? So there are 4 important immunomodulators which we are going to talk about. So when we talk about, this is the viremia phase, fever begins, and then comes the critical phase where the entire immunomodulation cytokine storm happens. So sometimes when it surpasses the hemodynamic status and you land up in different kind of the disastrous complications, there the role of the immunomodulation helps. Next slide. So one of the strongest immunomodulator known till centuries is the corticosteroids. Then comes the intravenous immunoglobulins. There is the data coming up with the baricitinib, which we used initially for rheumatoid. Even in COVID, we have seen in a lot of patients. And now in dengue, there has been certain case reports. And of course, anakinra. Next slide. Now, if I highlight about the role of steroids, so it's like a jigsaw puzzle. Although it's not recommended for sure because it's an infection, definitely. But yes, immunological mediated complications, say in ITP, onset of the acute disseminated encephalomyelitis, still favors and supports the role of steroids. But as we say, antimicrobial stewardship, steroid stewardship is as important and as critical in the cases of the fevers like dengue, when to give, when not to give, when to stop. Next slide. Next slide. So cut the short stories. So we have the state of conundrum. So on one side, it's the potent immunomodulator. It stabilizes and prevents the damage to the endothelial glycocalyx. So of course, the lesser of the circulatory complication, lesser of the vascular damage. But on the other side, we all know and we are all wary of the side effects related with the steroids in terms of the increased flare-up of secondary infections. And one more important thing, because there are platelet low, it can predispose for the stress ulcers and the upper GI bleed. So we need to be aware of this dosing, and we need to be aware of the strong of the indications rather than just increase of the mild ferritin with the betterment of the patient. Next slide. Next slide. Now, intravenous immunoglobulin is the another immunomodulator, although doesn't mean that we have to generalize its role into each and every patient, but for the limited patients, because this also interacts with the FC receptors of the IgG. So of course, this also suppresses the virus-induced cytokine cascade, increases anti-inflammatory cytokines, as Shobha ma'am has told about, the entire cytokine storm mediated to the pro-inflammatory cytokine leading to the damage, something like what happens in the sepsis. So it also prevents the activated complement pathway inhibitor. And being an immunoglobulin in the intravenous forms, it works exactly like a colloid and increases the oncotic pressure and a intravascular repleter. Next slide. Now, there are again the checks and balances in terms of the IVIG being used as a rescue therapy in the refractory dengue. When we talk about refractory, means that the patient has tried and tested all the first line and the second line therapies of the dengue. Although there is no typical clear-cut data that when to use the IVIG, but when there is no significant benefit from the different immunomodulators, because there is no adverse effect of IVIG, that can be used. But doesn't mean that putting up an IVIG will lead to the magnificent and miraculous results, because A, the time of onset is at least 3 to 7 days, and B, dosing, the repetition is still not justified and established as a guideline. Next slide. So we have also tried IVIG in the certain forms, and specifically talking about the immunocompromised patient. Now, just a touch point upon the anakinra and baricitinib, because by the virtue they are IL-1 antagonist and baricitinib works as the JAK inhibitor, they are the standard of care now for managing the hyperinflammation. And there has been studies going on in the dengue, because IL-1 by the virtue not only causes more inflammation, but also causes the scarring, also causes the bone resorptions, etc. Next slide. Now, as I mentioned about that the dengue management, one size can never fits all. So for example, when we talk about the heart patients having in the dengue, doesn't mean we upfront stop their anticoagulant. We need to be having an interdisciplinary coordination in that times. Patients who are on the recent double antiplatelet therapy, they have just underwent a stenting. We have to keep a close monitoring, and at least the minimum doses of aspirin to be continued till 50,000. Otherwise, that can land up in the stent thrombosis. Patients of chronic kidney disease with dialysis, chronic liver disease, and cardiomyopathy, wonderfully hemodynamic-based management, cardiac output-based management, echo and the point-of-care ultrasounds has been a phenomenal in targeting and guiding the fluid therapy. Doesn't have to generalize that 2 liter or 3 liter or 4 liter for each and every patient. Next slide. Next slide. Next. Now, this is the last section, another 1-2 slides more. So about the newer therapeutic agents, so there are 2 categories in that. One, a totally newer class which acting on the viral part of it. Whereas the old drugs, which has been recycled in the usage of the dengue management, are something which works on the host and the immunomodulator concept of the dengue infection. Next slide. Now, these are the newer therapeutic agents which has been targeted as the antiviral, which works on the different stages, right from the entry or a fusion inhibitor to its replication, to causing the nucleoside analog, preventing the replication, and then eventually working on the packaging and assembly, like example in the HIV form. So these are the different the agents being tried and tested in the phase 1 or 2 trials to understand and develop the different kind of therapeutic targets in the dengue domain. Next slide. Now, a word for the older agents in the newer role for dengue. So doxycycline, we all know, is work not only as an antibiotic, but it works wonderfully as an anti-inflammatory agent. So it has been seen that dengue patients, because whenever there is a season of dengue, our differentials, as Dr. Saurabh has highlighted, is the scrub or lepto. So doxycycline comes as a little empiric choices. But in this case, doxycycline also work as a TNF alpha inhibitor and IL-6 inhibitors. And they have seen when doxycycline treated group was there was more than 45% lower mortality than observed in the untreated group. So it helps in the survival benefit ratio. Darunavir, which is one of the HIV drug being prescribed as a second line, also inhibits the dengue viral replication by binding it to the envelope protein. Next slide. Even our commonest antiemetic called deumperidone, which is actually a class inhibitors. It inhibits the dengue virus infection by targeting its envelope protein and NSP1 protein. These are the scientific reports which has been published recently by the Nature, and they have shown that how by potential repurposing of domperidone, which is a gastrokinetic agent, by the way, 5-HT4, controls and inhibits the dengue replication at the stage 1 itself. Next slide. A word about the therapeutic monoclonal antibodies, which Sir was also mentioning in the beginning. So this has been a cross-neutralizing antibody which formed against the different domains of the envelope protein and the quaternary structures of the dimers. So one of the commonest one amongst that is the VIS-513, which is a pan-serotype monoclonal antibody. And it is something in the therapeutic in nature, which can be started either 24 hours first or 5 days even post-dengue infection when the critical phase begins. Phase 2 study is still ongoing, and the Dengue Shield, like Serum Institute of India, has also been into the formulation. So this monoclonal antibody works against the therapeutic in 2 aspects. One, if you start upfront early for the day 1, preventing the replication of the virus upfront. And if you start on the day 5, because the entire complication domain starts with the ADE-based complication. So this also inhibits that ADE effect also. Next slide. So just to highlight and now to summarize that we need to understand mild, moderate, and severe dengue complications, not only for the classification from the medical perspective, but also for the counseling and prognosis. Give IV fluids when only required, and stop IV fluids when your targets are achieved. No hard brushing, no IM injection, no NSAIDs. Maximum times to avoid. Always have to explain about the natural history of the disease and the present status of the patient. New tricks for old foe are always welcomed as far as they are side effect profile free and as far as they are well backed by the evidence. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Neha. It's a pleasure listening to you.